Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the weekly Wednesday for the Financial Freedom newsletter, where every week, every Wednesday, we delve into something inspirational, motivational, something excerpt taken from the Financial Freedom weekly newsletter. Wherever you are, if you're listening on Spotify, on iTunes, Google, be sure to click the like, subscribe, share, comment. And without ado, let's get into the show.
For a half hour.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest, Brian Childress. He's a technical advisor, fractional CTO. If you're wondering what that is, there's previous episodes about what a fractional CTO, CMO is, and we're going to talk today all about technology, innovation, software, SaaS, founders, entrepreneurship. I'm really excited about today's guest. Brian, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, we connected through Podmatch, and tell people about your background, your story, how you got started, and we'll get right into it.
Yeah, so I got into technology many, many years ago. So I'm a software engineer, software architect by trade and training. So I have the opportunity to work with a number of different businesses and startups building out their technology, building out their software.
Yeah. So what was it about? When I was growing up, the mantra was to get a job basically, and high paying professional job. But now it's like software is eating the world. So what was it about software that appealed to you?
It's kind of interesting. I didn't really get into software until probably after my undergraduate. I wasn't the kid that was writing games and code at 8 years old. It wasn't me. But I got into software because I really like solving problems and I really like building things. And software just turned out that it offered both of those. Software as an industry really requires you to be constantly learning. Like, it is required to always be learning, or you're going to fall behind really, really quickly. And I think that really spoke to me, something that I really enjoyed. And so I've just continued to go down the software and technology rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's so appealing because they say that one day in software or in tech is like 1 month in the real world. It like moves so fast, just looking at ChatGPT when it came out in November, and now it's like, now they have generative AI and, deep fakes, and it's just exponential. Talk about scalability also, because that's one thing is software scales, right? So it's infinite. Talk about that.
Yeah, so one big area that I focus on is scalability of software. And I work with a lot of companies and a lot of organizations just to try and understand how are they approaching scalability. So I tend to talk about it in three ways. Usually software scales by adding more users, right? That's kind of what we think about. The Facebooks and the Googles of the world, how many users they have. But we also need to be able to scale by just adding more features, right? Customers are eager to have more functionality, easier to use software. And then the third place that we scale is around adding more developers. How can I add more engineers? And in the world that we live in now, that usually means those engineers are spread across the globe. I typically work on projects where we have 5 to 6 different time zones at play. We have folks kind of spread all over. What's interesting, though, a lot of business software can be very, very simple. It doesn't necessarily need to be complex. It doesn't need to be, built the same way that Google does, just doesn't have the same, requirements. And so I work with a lot of companies to just, make sure that what we build is actually what they need and not what some big tech company might need.
And I love this idea of creating a prototype or a MVP, minimal viable product. So talk about for non-technical founders, a lot of founders, they are good marketers or sales, or they're good at building relationships. So talk about simple software always wins in developing software as a non-technical founder.
Yeah, this is a really interesting area. I get to work with a lot of non-technical founders, and I like to say that technology is the easiest part of what we do, right? The marketing and the sales and the interaction between people, like that's the hard stuff. Technology is fairly easy to build, right? I mean, we can, it's coming to that as a technologist. Maybe it's pretty easy for me to say that. But as a non-technical founder, it's really, really amazing with a lot of the new platforms that are coming online that are becoming available. Someone that doesn't have a deep technical background is able to build on their own, and they can really start to solve business problems. They can really start to make really good money for their, in working with their customers without having to write actual custom software. There's a lot of things that we can do before we ever actually have to start, building an app or creating something out there.
And what are some of like biggest challenges non-technical founders face?
This is something I've been thinking about a lot and talking with a lot of colleagues in the industry on. And I really think that the challenge that most non-technical founders face is that they don't know what advice is good advice. And so I'll give an example. So a lot of non-technical founders, right, they have a great idea. Like you say, they're great marketers, they're great at sales. And so they don't know, like, how do I solve this problem with technology? And so they kind of go out and say, hey, I need someone to build me an app that's going to do this thing, right? And so they'll talk to their friends. They might have a cousin who, created a website at one point. They may go to some new college graduates. They may, try and hire a consulting agency, and they're going to get a huge estimate for what it's going to take to build this thing. And so they're confused. A lot of non-technical founders just don't know where to start. And so, they may have limited money to actually put into the project. So they're going to kind of buy what they can afford right now. And a lot of times, unfortunately, what they're buying is actually not really a good product or good advice. So that's usually where I come into the mix, is after a non-technical founder has had that experience where they've worked with a development agency or they've worked with a freelancer and just are not happy with what was created. So I get to come in and kind of clean things up and get the product going in the right direction for them.
Yeah, I love that. So the other question is, what factors to consider when hiring freelancers, consultancies, or agencies? And we'll talk about making or how to avoid mistakes when building the SaaS company.
Yeah, I think to take your first question there, like, what are some of the areas that are things that we really need to consider? Yeah, this is a great area to look for recommendations from friends and colleagues. Who have they worked with and had actual great success? Talking with other clients of the freelancer, the development agency, seeing what their experience was like, really just getting a good idea of what they're able to deliver. One of my benchmarks that I look for when interviewing either freelancers or development agencies is how many questions do they ask of me as the person trying to hire them versus how much, just initial guidance are they giving? Because if, a freelancer or an agency comes in and says, oh, I have a rough idea of what you're trying to build, and it's going to, require these technologies, and it's going to take us this long and require this many people, and it's going to cost this much, but they haven't really dug into the business and really understanding what it is we're trying to build. To me, that's a pretty big red flag. Because they have a prescribed set of ways that they work that may not fit in my unique scenario.
Talk about avoiding these mistakes when building their SaaS company. And you also talk about risk of hiring an offshore developer.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that can probably go kind of hand in hand. If you're hiring anyone and, offshore just makes it a little bit more complicated. But if you're hiring anyone, I think one of the biggest things that I try and guide founders or companies to is to make sure that you have ownership of everything. And so what I mean by that is when you hire a freelancer or you hire a development agency and you haven't done these steps, it's typical that that freelancer is going to maintain and host all of the source code. They're going to be hosting your systems, your software somewhere. And so they are actually in control of essentially, all or a large portion of your business. And that can put you in a really bad place in the future, right? If the freelancer is hosting all of the code on their servers in their accounts and something goes bad or they just kind of disappear, in the middle of the night, your code is gone. Like there's not a lot that, as someone coming in after the fact, there's not a lot that I can do to help. So I always encourage, founders to be the ones to set up the GitHub accounts, to set up the hosting accounts, and then just grant access to the freelancer or to the development agency so that they maintain control. Another thing that I always encourage folks to do is be constantly getting updates that you can see and play around with. A lot of the horror stories that we hear is, oh, I just paid this freelancer $50,000 or $100,000 to go and build this thing. They disappeared for 3 months, kept telling me that we were making good progress, but then I never actually saw anything working. I could never play around with it. And that is a big, big red flag that unfortunately I see a lot of folks end up losing a lot of money and time because they just aren't seeing progress. You should be requiring, at least weekly, where there's updates that you can kind of go in and play around with to make sure that what's being built is the thing that, you had in your mind and what your customers are telling you they want.
It's all about control and ownership in these days. Control your IP, your brand, your platform, control your time, income, everything. Don't put it in the hands of, some outside entity or, whatnot. The other question is, should founders spend time building their idea or validating the idea?
I encourage founders to validate the idea. I like to say, if you can't sell, a prototype or sell the idea to someone, you either haven't found your ideal client, you haven't, hit on the right pain point that folks are really looking for a solution. So building custom software, spending months and hundreds of thousands of dollars isn't going to get you there. So I always encourage founders to validate that idea. When you have people just trying to throw money at you because they're so excited that you might be the one to solve their problem, then you know that you've touched on, you found the right solution and you found your ideal client.
You've been really with AI in the with the buzz these days. It's all about AI. How do you see AI changing the startup landscape in the next 5 years?
I think AI is really, really interesting space. I'm very excited to kind of see where things go. I know if we watch the news, there's all kinds of crazy, scary things, and being in technology, I absolutely understand how those could manifest. But I think that AI is really, really going to push us forward in significant ways. The startup ecosystem is going to be changing significantly. The ways that we can access information and the speed at which we can understand information is really impressive. I've had the opportunity to work with a number of AI-focused startups, and the ways that they're able to process just so much information and distill it down into something that we as humans can easily wrap our heads around is just incredibly impressive. And it's only going to continue, right? We're just in those very early days. And like you mentioned earlier, we're just seeing that speed up so quickly.
Yeah, AI is going to be, a platform, and it's going to be a service. And it's going to be interesting to see how companies use AI to scale and how they use AI. For example, ChatGPT, there's a $20 per month subscription for the Plus. And then, so what advice do you have for founders looking to scale their SaaS company?
So again, I think scaling happens in 3 ways. If you're trying to add users, really try and figure out the current users that you have, what do they like? What do they not like? And double down on the things that they do like and try and address problems with the things that they don't like. See if they have friends, see if they have colleagues that have similar challenges, and you may be able to bring them in on your product. Scaling the underlying infrastructure, that's fairly easy to do. I mean, there's a lot that we can just pay more money for hosting to add additional users. And then I think just being very strategic in your product roadmap, just making sure that the features that you are adding to the product really make sense for you in the medium to longer term strategically. A lot of areas I see founders kind of get tripped up is they try and add features for every customer that they have. And then over time, the product just becomes very confusing, very difficult to work on, and customers just become kind of frustrated. So don't try and solve everyone's problems, but really being strategic in what features you do add to the platform.
Yeah, I love that. Kind of as we kind of wrap it up, we have around 5-7 minutes talking about, your success, what's helped you succeed, what's held you back, how can people contact you, check out your work, reach out to you, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things that I think have really led to my success is really pushing myself, pushing outside of my comfort zone. Speaking to you today, 4 or 5 years ago would have terrified me, right? But now I really enjoy it. I love going to speak at conferences and being up on the public stage. But to get there, that really required me to push against my comfort zone. I am really, really excited about technology. And so I try and learn and consume as much information as I can about everything that's kind of happening in the technology ecosystem. Even if it's in an area that I don't necessarily do work in day to day, I still think it's very important to kind of stay up to speed on what's going on and how things are evolving. So I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, conference talks, and reading blogs and that sort of thing, just to stay up to date with what's going on.
YouTube, webinars, podcast, live stream. This is like the modern day speaking tour now. I mean, you can do five in a day. You don't even have to get out of your homes. It's incredible. How can people follow you, reach out to you, your contact info, etc.?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is I'm most active on LinkedIn. So Brian Childress on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, send me a DM, connection request. I'm happy to connect with anyone, and we can certainly schedule a call, and I can help you out any way I can.
Yeah, and for all the audience out there, it's a really fascinating discussion with Brian. I love his story and his nuggets. Be sure to check him out. He's on LinkedIn, Twitter, and all of his resources will be in the links and show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming on. It was a great discussion.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
I hope you really enjoyed that wonderful, inspirational, motivational piece. Again, wherever you are listening, if you liked it, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on everywhere: Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, Audible. And without much ado, be sure to thank this show's sponsors, and we'll see you next week.